Hey again. I feel like I've been doing a lot of just reflecting and just like heavy stuff lately, so for this week's video, we are going to dive back into some true crime like we used to. Um, Jonestown and the People's Temple and the cult by extension is actually something my friend Jason recommended before he, so I want to do it some justice because it's the last one I have. Obviously, the big event that Jonestown is known for is the massacre. That happened in 1978, and it involved 900 people either being convinced to or forced to take some flavor aid laced with cyanide. And 900 people died because of that, and a lot of them were kids. The compound itself was held down in South America in a place now known as Guyana, but I feel like there's only so much detail I can go into about that specific incident, so I want to talk about other stuff, like what happened before this. The People's Temple had plenty of history before this specific event, so it was actually started kind of informally back in the 1950s, but it was in Indianapolis, not originally in South America. It wasn't a cult just yet, but it was an independent congregation, and things would go relatively without issue into the 60s. The People's Temple itself was actually like way ahead of its time in terms of ideologies. Jim Jones had a core belief that a just society would also eliminate all poverty and racism, and that really struck a chord for marginalized communities. Civil rights in the 60s, you probably already know this, was a really big issue, so Jim Jones's belief really drew in a lot of people, especially African Americans. The church itself was pretty closely affiliated with Christian churches, and they even did things for the community like running a homeless shelter and a soup kitchen. The only real crack that started to show was in about the mid 1960s when Jim Jones thought he saw a vision of an incoming nuclear holocaust. This made him so unbelievably paranoid. Because of this, he took his entire compound in Indianapolis and he moved it to California. Things in the States were kind of tense for Jim Jones and the People's Temple, though. Even in California, the press would talk about how there was abuse and mistreatment of the members going on behind the scenes in the People's Temple, and it was just tension building and building for Jim Jones. He felt like he needed to find another place to move his people to. He would lay the roots for this in 1974. That's when Jonestown really began. In Guyana, South America, he rented out 3,800 acres of land, and he sent some young, strong, able-bodied men in his congregation to go ahead and go there before he sent the people. They would cut down trees, level the land, and build houses and things. It was hard, brutal labor, but since there was only 50 people at the time, they managed to make a semi-stable community. This only changed later when Jim Jones brought in nearly 1,000 people to live there. I think it's important to note that this compound in Guyana was extremely hard to access. It was miles upon miles away from any airport, and in order to get in and out, you had to trek through very dangerous terrain. A lot of people who would go to the compound wouldn't really be able to navigate themselves if they wanted to leave. And conditions inside the compound were kind of awful too. This isolation from the rest of the world made for an echo chamber where Jim Jones's beliefs could really go unchallenged. Jim Jones would also give sermons regarding his paranoia and how the rest of the world was just turning to shit all around them, and the only real safe place or the only real slice of heaven they had was the Jonestown compound. He was also really into the idea of revolutionary suicide, and for multiple times he would do drills where he would tell the people of Jonestown he had poisoned some flavor aid or some drink, and he wanted them to drink it as a test of loyalty. These people would end up drinking this so-called poison drink, but only after they did would he reveal that it wasn't actually poison and they had passed the test. Relatives of the people in Jonestown became very, very concerned for their family members. These concerned relatives of the people of Jonestown began to believe that their family members were in danger, and they were right. These people begged for American authorities to get involved, and in the 1970s they would. U.S. Congressman Leo J. Ryan went to visit Jonestown on some kind of official mission, and he did manage to go to Jonestown, and they collected some footage, but after they went back to the airport to go to America, a few members of the People's Temple also came and shot them. They killed the congressman along with a cameraman, I believe, and a few others. The thing is, though, this would be the spark that ignited some kind of flame of paranoia in Jim Jones. I mean, they did kill some American people, so I guess it is reasonable to believe that the authorities would come and get them now, but Jim Jones was a deeply paranoid man, and in his mind, it didn't just mean his compound was over and he was going to get arrested. It meant that all the people of Jonestown, including the children, they were not only going to be taken hostage by the U.S. government, but also brainwashed and to suffer a fate worse than death. In comparison to what he thought would happen, death was a far more merciful end, and he told his people as much. And of course, that's what led up to the big event of Jonestown, the massacre. In the fallout of this, members of the People's Temple disbanded, the group in California, and there was also a few members of the People's Temple in Georgetown, which was a place just outside of the Jonestown compound in Guyana, and Jim Jones Jr., the guy's son, was also in Georgetown at that time. He was one of the few survivors because even though Jim Jones had given him the order to kill himself, he didn't. I think this event and the ideas that Jim Jones had is just ripe with delusion. He had paranoia, obviously, and a lot of strange beliefs that he kind of projected onto the people in his congregation. It extended beyond religion and into this unhealthy, manipulative territory that obviously led to people dying. What I find interesting, though, is he didn't always appear like that. In the beginning of setting up the People's Temple, he was a charismatic man. It was a very subtle decline over the next few decades that really showed his true colors. I do think Jim Jones was a very delusional man, and a lot of this to me sounds like the exact same patterns an abuser would use on their victims. It preyed on people, and it isolated them from the rest of the world and led them to believe that Jonestown was the only place they could ever be safe, and if they couldn't be safe there, then there was no other place to be. There was also a level of grandiosity to it as well for Jim Jones. If the apocalypse was upon them, then that was something that made him feel pretty important, I bet. He, quote-unquote, knew the apocalypse was upon them, and therefore he could use that knowledge to help people, and he was kind of above people in that way. I could probably make a spin or like some kind of smart moral out of this, but I just think it's an interesting case. It's very fascinating to me, maybe a little personal to me, how religion and delusion can mix in a very dangerous way. I think I'll leave it off with, know what you believe. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, if you will. Except, you can drink the Kool-Aid because it's the flavor aid you really gotta watch out for. Look it up. Alright, I'll see you guys next week.